You may close your eyes now, if they aren't already. The road is quiet, the air still. You're sitting on an old wooden bench, beneath the gray arms of a hawthorn tree. The sky above is pale as paper, and the wind smells like rain that hasn't fallen yet. Eva had been waiting for some time. Her suitcase rested by her feet, stitched canvas with a broken clasp, the kind that always popped open at the worst moment. She checked her pocket watch, but the hands weren't moving, only ticking softly in place. The coach was meant to come at sundown, but sundown had passed, and all that remained was the slow folding of shadows into the hedgerows. She wasn't afraid. Not really. Just tired. Tired in the way you get when you've been traveling too long, with shoes that don't fit quite right, and the wrong name written on your travel papers. She stood, brushed the dust from her coat, and looked both ways down the narrow lane. There were no signs, no sound of wheels, only a distant hush, like a field of wheat sighing beneath the wind. That's when she saw them. Two men, standing just where the path curved out of sight. Well-dressed, quiet. One held a walking stick with a carved handle, the head of a fox worn smooth. The other held his hat in both hands, as if apologizing before he even spoke. "Evening," said the man with the hat. His voice was low, pleasant, but something about it made her spine sit up straight. "We couldn't help noticing you were waiting here alone." Eva said nothing at first. Her eyes traced the space behind them, a break in the hedges, a distant barn, the glint of something silver far off. "My coach," she said quietly, "didn't arrive." "Unreliable things, coaches," said the one with the stick. He smiled, but only with his mouth. "Come," said the other. "Our house is just beyond the orchard. You must be cold." He gestured gently, as if inviting her into a garden, or a quiet library. Eva hesitated. Something inside her, some old voice passed down through women like her, said no. But the rest of her, the ache in her legs, the dry in her throat, the numb hum behind her thoughts, said maybe, just for a moment, just until morning. She followed them. The lane narrowed, lined with wild roses and climbing vines. They passed through a wooden gate, its hinges silent as they turned. Beyond it, the orchard, but not like any she had seen before. The trees were all the same height. Their branches hung perfectly even, each one holding apples of exactly the same size. No birds sang among them, no bees, no rustle of foxes, only the soft sound of shoes on damp grass. And that was enough. The house appeared suddenly, as if it had been waiting for her. It sat low to the ground, roof thick with moss, windows shuttered tight. A lantern burned behind one curtain, its glow flickering like a heartbeat. Inside everything was neat, neater than any farmhouse she'd seen. Fire already lit, already steeping. A blanket folded over a chair in her exact shade of blue. "I'll draw you a bath," one said. "Lay your things here," said the other. She removed her coat, her scarf, her suitcase by the door. When she turned back, they were both gone. Only the teacup waited, steam curling upward like the tail of a cat. Eva sat. She did not sip. She only looked into the fire, and waited to wake up, because this felt, not like a dream, but like the part of a dream, where you know something is wrong, but you don't know what yet. The night outside was quiet, but something, somewhere, was watching. The stillness deepens. The fire crackles low, and something unseen moves gently in the shadows. Not danger, but the sense of something waiting to be understood. Eva did not remember falling asleep, only that she woke in a room that smelled of lavender and wood smoke. The light was pale, filtered through lace curtains, and the silence was so complete, it made her breath sound loud. She lay there for a while, not quite ready to move. The blanket covering her was soft, a wool weave in a quiet green, too fine for a country cottage. A wash basin sat in the corner, its porcelain gleaming. Next to it, a folded towel, a silver comb, and a small bottle of rose water. Someone had prepared this for her. The thought brought a small shiver to her chest. She rose slowly. Her dress from the night before had been pressed, her shoes cleaned and placed neatly beside the bed. Everything was tidy, too tidy. She crossed the room and touched the doorknob, turned, but only halfway. The door did not open. From the outside, her hand stayed on the knob for a moment, not tugging, not rattling, just resting there, as if it might somehow explain itself. When she turned, she noticed something else. There were no mirrors in the room. Not on the wall, not on the wardrobe, not even in the dressing set by the basin. Just the window, and the view through it. She walked closer. The orchard stretched beyond the glass. Rows upon rows of perfect apple trees. No birds, no movement, just a slight breeze, curling the mist between the trunks. And something strange. The orchard looked exactly the same as it had last night. Not similar, exactly the same. Every branch, every shadow, in the exact same place. She stepped back. On the bedside table, a plate had been left for her. 2 slices of warm bread, curl of soft cheese, and a cup of chamomile tea, still steaming. Someone had been here recently. She pressed a finger to the cup, then looked again at the door. A quiet click broke the silence. The lock turned from the outside, and the door opened, slowly, deliberately. One of the men stood there, the one with the walking stick. He smiled, as if nothing at all was strange. "Ah, good morning," he said. "Did you sleep well?" Eva's voice caught in her throat, but she nodded. "I trust the room suits you. We try to make it peaceful. It's important to feel calm." He glanced at the tea. "I hope you like chamomile." She nodded again, more slowly this time. "You'll forgive the locked door," he said, not waiting for her to ask. "The wind tends to open them otherwise, and we wouldn't want you catching a chill." His tone was smooth, practiced, the kind used by hosts in fine drawing rooms. But something about the word wind lingered oddly in her ear. "There's a sitting room downstairs," he added. "Books if you'd like, or perhaps a game. We keep things simple here." Then, with a gentle nod, he stepped aside. Eva walked past him, down the hallway. The wallpaper was pale gold, with patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from the corner of the eye. She descended the staircase, her fingers lightly brushing the polished banister. At the bottom, hallway stretched left and right. No paintings on the walls, no shoes by the door, no coat hooks, as if no one ever truly arrived. The sitting room waited on the right. A fire burned gently in the hearth. 2 chairs, table with a tea service, closed book, spine unmarked. The second man stood by the window. He turned as she entered. "Ah," he said, his voice soft. "Our guest is awake." He motioned to the chair. "Please. We have time." "For what?" Eva asked softly, her voice rasped. The 2 men smiled, but did not answer.
"Certainly. Let the story unfold further now, as we slip deeper into the hushed unease of the house behind the orchard. The fire still burns low. The room is still tidy. But behind each gesture, each polite word, something else lingers. Something that does not quite breathe." Eva sat very still. The chair was too comfortable, its cushion too firm, as though it had never truly been sat in before. The fire crackled softly in the hearth. It smelled faintly of cedar and cloves. Outside, the orchard glowed silver beneath the morning mist. She folded her hands in her lap. The man by the window poured tea into a porcelain cup. He did it slowly, carefully, without a single drop spilled. "Milk?" he asked. She shook her head. "No sugar either?" He raised a brow, amused. "No, thank you." He placed the cup gently before her. The tea was the same as before. Chamomile. Always chamomile. The other man sat in the chair across from her, leaning slightly forward, walking stick resting against his knee. "So," he said lightly, "tell us more about where you were headed." Eva hesitated, not because she didn't remember, but because she wasn't sure she wanted them to know. "Larkspur," she said at last. "My uncle has a small farm just outside the village." Larkspur. The man with the stick repeated it softly, as if tasting the syllables. "I've heard it's lovely this time of year," said the other, sipping his tea. "Fields of forget-me-nots. A quiet chapel. Goats that nibble your boots." He laughed lightly at his own joke. Eva did not. "And how long were you planning to stay?" asked the first, tilting his head. "Just a week," she said, watching both of them carefully now. "Though I'm starting to wonder if I'll ever arrive." That earned a smile from both, but not a real one. She picked up her cup, if only to give her hand something to do. "Is there a carriage into the village?" she asked. "Or a telegraph station?" The man with the stick glanced at the window, then back to her. "Transportation can be unpredictable here," he said. "The orchard tends to discourage it." "Discourage," she echoed. "Trees get in the way, roots in the road, that sort of thing." Eva set her cup down. "Are there other houses nearby?" The second man answered this time. "There were, long ago, but people tend to move on." "To where?" He smiled. "That's always the question, isn't it?" She stared at them for a long moment. Their suits were neat, their shoes too clean. Their hair never moved, not even when the window stood open behind them. "You still haven't told me your names," she said. "Names," said the one with the stick. "Does it matter?" "It might," she replied quietly. "You may call me Martin," said one. "And I am Finch," said the other. She waited for them to laugh, to correct themselves. But they did not. Martin and Finch, like characters in a fable. Eva stood. She could feel their eyes follow her, with the quiet precision of cats. "I'd like to walk the orchard," she said. "Clear my head." "Of course," said Finch, already rising. "I'll fetch you a shawl." "That won't be necessary." But he left the room anyway. Martin stayed where he was, hands folded over his walking stick. "You seem unsettled," he said softly. "I am. We're doing our best to make you comfortable." "Comfort," she murmured, "is not always the same as freedom." Martin smiled at that, and said nothing. Finch returned with a gray shawl, not hers, but soft, fragrant with lavender. She draped it over her shoulders and stepped outside. The orchard stretched in every direction. The trees stood exactly the same as before, every branch in place. No bees, no birds, only stillness. She walked between the rows, counting the trees under her breath. 20-30. Still no end. Behind her, the house sat quiet. Its windows reflected only sky. Eva walked faster, then slower, then stopped. She was back where she started. The same tree, the same stone, even the same fallen apple, split in half. It hadn't been a path. It had been a loop. "Let's continue now," gently, as the hush thickens, and the orchard grows stiller than before. "You are safe as you listen." But Eva is not sure what's real, or what is meant to feel real. By the time Eva returned to the house, the afternoon light had shifted. Long shadows stretched like fingers across the orchard lawn, and the air felt cooler, as though dusk had arrived early, or time had simply decided to change direction. The door creaked softly when she pushed it open. Inside, still silence. No trace of Martin. No sound from Finch. Only the faint tick of a grandfather clock in the hallway, ticking too slowly, as though each second had to be coaxed into passing. She moved through the house quietly, not sneaking, not hiding, just gliding. Like her shoes had grown softer, like the floorboards no longer noticed her. At the end of the hall, she found a door she hadn't noticed before. It was slightly ajar. A sliver of golden light spilled through the gap. Eva hesitated, then pushed it open. Inside, a square room. But not quite. The corners were wrong. Too curved. Too soft. As though the walls were trying not to meet. The wallpaper was pale blue, printed with tiny leaves. that seemed to shift whenever she looked directly at them. No furniture, except for a single writing desk and a chair facing the window. On the desk, a single piece of parchment, and beside it, a quill, still wet with ink. She stepped closer. The paper was blank, but only at first glance. When she tilted her head, words began to appear, slowly, as if soaking up through the fibers. You are not the first, and you may not be the last, but you are the only one still awake. Eva's breath caught. She blinked, and the ink faded again, disappearing back into the page like water into sand. She picked up the quill, turned it over, still damp. The chair behind her scraped softly, not from her movement, but as if someone had just stood up. She spun around. No one. The door still open. The hallway still empty. Eva backed out of the room, her fingers brushing the parchment one last time, and in that instant, the writing returned. Don't drink the second tea. Her heartbeat thudded in her chest. She shut the door, pressing her back to it, trying to quiet the pounding in her ears. From somewhere downstairs, a gentle voice called up, "Eva, we've prepared supper." She composed herself, smoothed her dress, walked down the stairs, as though nothing at all had happened. The dining room had been lit with oil lamps, their glow soft and flickering. A long table had been set, with fine china and silver spoons. Martin and Finch stood waiting, perfect as portraits. "Please," said Martin, gesturing to a chair, "join us." Eva sat slowly. In front of her, a bowl of something warm. Stew, perhaps, but unfamiliar. Pale broth, dotted with small black seeds. And beside it, a fresh cup of chamomile tea. She stared at the steam, watched it curl upward, like a question she didn't yet know how to ask. Finch raised his own cup, smiling politely. Eva's fingers curled around her spoon. She took a bite of a stew. Salt, earth, a strange sweetness. Martin poured himself more tea, but did not offer her more. Finch watched her closely as she touched her cup, but she did not lift it. "I'm not thirsty," she said softly. Finch tilted his head. "Are you certain?" "I've had enough," she replied. And she smiled. The way you smile, when you know something you shouldn't know. Later, in her room, the teacup from supper appeared on her bedside table. Still full, still steaming. She poured it down the wash basin, slowly, quietly, and as the last drops swirled down the drain, the wallpaper seemed to sigh.
Told in that same calm, trance-like rhythm, meant for drifting eyes and drowsy minds. The night had wrapped itself tightly around the orchard. No stars, no moon. Just darkness stretched like black silk. Across the sky, Eva lay awake, her eyes half closed, watching the glow of the lantern on her nightstand. She hadn't lit it, and yet it had been burning softly. When she returned from supper, its flame made no sound, but it flickered oddly, not with breeze, but as if something unseen passed in front of it. Again and again, he sat up. The blanket slid from her shoulders, soft as fog. Her fingers brushed the floor, and that's when she heard it creak. Then another, heavy, low footsteps beneath her. Not on the stairs, not in the hallway, under the room. She held her breath. The sound paused, then resumed, as though whoever it was had stopped to listen to her listening. She rose, careful not to make a sound, crossed the room, kneeled beside the bed, pressed her ear to the floorboards. There it was, a measured step, then another, circling, faintly scraping the wood. Then silence, a long, unnatural silence. She pressed her palm flat against the boards. They were warm, too warm, the kind of warmth that suggested something lived there. Recently, she stood again, pulled on her shawl, stepped lightly toward the door. It was unlocked. For the first time since her arrival, the hallway greeted her with open arms. She moved like a shadow, barefoot and cautious, one hand grazing the wall as she followed the faintest sound. Not of footsteps anymore, but of humming. A low, wordless hum, soft and slow, the way someone might lull a child to sleep. Down the hallway, past the sitting room, toward the door she hadn't noticed before. Cellar. The wooden door had no handle, only a smooth indentation, as if fingers had once pressed there. Again and again and again, she placed her hand on it. It opened soundlessly. A staircase led down into darkness, and at the bottom, a thin thread of golden light. She hesitated, then stepped down. The air was colder here, earthy, ill. Each stair creaked gently under her weight, but the hum remained constant. At the bottom, she found a corridor of stone. The light came from an open doorway ahead. She approached slowly. Inside, shelves. Hundreds of shelves. And on every shelf, teacup, white porcelain, each one marked with a tiny name, scratched beneath the rim. She stepped closer. Emma, Cecily, Ruth, Relia. Dozens, hundreds. Some names had been crossed out, others freshly carved. And on the shelf just above her eye level, a teacup with her name, Eva. She reached for it, lifted it from the shelf. Inside, a scrap of paper curled at the bottom. You were not meant to stay awake this long. Her fingers trembled. The humming stopped. From behind her, a soft voice murmured, "We don't usually come down here at night." A turn. Finch stood in the doorway, hands folded neatly before him. His face was calm. "Come. We try to keep it peaceful," he said. "For everyone's sake." Eva said nothing. He stepped closer. "We thought the tea would help. Most people don't notice the taste after the second cup." "I didn't drink it," she said, barely above a whisper. "I know," he replied. And in that moment, something in his eyes flickered. Not anger, not disappointment, but something colder, something patient, like a clock, ticking toward a moment it always knew would arrive. "Let us continue now." In quiet tones and deepening stillness, where nothing moves unless it must, and even silence holds its breath, softly told like a candlelit dream. "You're not quite sure you want to wake from." Eva returned to her room, but it no longer felt like hers. The warmth had faded, the fire had gone cold, and the lantern, though still glowing, cast long, unfamiliar shadows. She placed the teacup on her bedside table, its rim still cold from the cellar. There were too many questions now, more than she could carry, but one stood above the rest. Who were the others? The names scratched into the porcelain lingered in her thoughts. Names too old, too gentle. Names that didn't belong to this century. Ruth, Cecily, Relia. Who carved them? Who remembered them? And what happened to the ones whose names were crossed out? She sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress felt firmer, like someone had just risen from it. She looked toward the window. The orchard lay in stillness, exactly the same as before. The trees untouched, the moonlight silvering each branch evenly, like a painting hung in place. But this time, there was someone standing among the trees. Tall figure, motionless, dressed in dark clothes, barely visible, except for the glint of something reflective. A watch chain, maybe, or the rim of glasses. Eva rose slowly, stepped closer to the window. The figure didn't move. She tried to see the face, but the mist curled around him, always in the way. She turned to light the lantern beside the window, and when she turned back, he was gone, not walked away, not disappeared into the trees. Like breath from a mirror. The next morning came quietly, no footsteps at the door, no voices calling her down to breakfast, only the low tick of that same clock in the hallway. She dressed and stepped into the corridor. The wallpaper seemed darker. The golden vines had dulled overnight. The house smelled faintly of dried herbs, and something metallic, like rain hitting old nails. Downstairs the sitting room was empty. No fire in the grate, no cups on the table, but on the sideboard, neatly arranged, 3 travel satchels, One labeled Martin, one Finch, and one with no name. But it was hers. She stepped closer. Inside her own bag, a pair of gloves, a notebook she didn't recognize, and a bundle of dried lavender tied with a red thread. A folded scrap of parchment sat atop the bundle. She unfolded it. "Do not leave through the front." She turned quickly, but the house was still empty. She opened the notebook. Each page was blank, except for one. The first page had a list, written in delicate handwriting. "Arrive before dusk. Refuse the tea. Remember the orchard does not change. Find the man in the window. Do not speak his name aloud." Eva's heart slowed in her chest. She turned the page. Nothing. Blank. She picked up the satchel and walked quietly through the house. Each door creaked a little louder than before. The floor groaned beneath her steps, as though the house was aware of her. She made her way toward the back, toward the kitchen, where the wallpaper ended, and stone floors began. The rear door had no lock, only a latch, old and rusted. It opened with a soft groan. Outside, the orchard again, but not the same. This time the trees were different. Some stood at odd angles. A few had fallen, their roots curling like skeletal fingers. The air was heavier, still misted, but now with a faint scent of ash. She stepped into the orchard. The branches did not move, but she could feel them watching. And then, just beyond the second row of trees, she saw him again. The man, this time facing her, still distant, still silent. Eva took one step forward. The wind stirred, and behind her, the door of the house slowly closed.
Yes, let's walk deeper now. Into the orchard, into the hush. The story unfolds like soft cloth in the dark, told in calm, sleep-bound language, meant to lead the listener through a slow and secret path. The orchard swallowed her footsteps. Each leaf seemed to hold its breath. Branches arched above her like cathedral vaults, and the path beneath her boots was made of moss and memory. Eva kept her eyes forward. The man stood just beyond the third row of trees, still and watching, his outline blurred slightly by the mist, as though reality didn't quite know how to hold him. She called out, but no sound came from her throat, only a shallow exhale, like the end of a sigh. She tried again. Still nothing. Her voice, like so many things in this place, had been misplaced. He didn't move, but something changed. The orchard seemed to lean inward, not threatening, just curious. Eva stepped closer. As she passed beneath the branches, a gentle creaking followed her. Not footsteps, not wind, something older. The sound of old wood remembering its shape. The man turned slightly, enough for her to glimpse part of his face. He looked young, but his eyes looked far too tired to be young. He raised a hand, not to wave, not to warn, but to beckon. Eva stepped closer. That's when she noticed the ribbon. A red silk ribbon, tied to a low branch. It fluttered, though there was no breeze. She reached out, and the moment her fingers brushed it, a sound filled the air. A voice. A girl's voice. But not hers. It whispered from the leaves. Faint. Disjointed. Like a lullaby remembered from a forgotten dream. We walked too far. We stayed too late. We drank the tea. And sealed our fate. The ribbon curled tighter. Its silk began to darken, as though ink were soaking upward from the knot. She let go. The man vanished. One blink, and he was no longer there. Only the trees remained. Still. Expectant. Eva turned in a slow circle. All directions looked the same. Every tree mirrored the last. Every leaf carried the same soft sheen. The air was the same temperature. Not warm, not cold. She could have walked in any direction, but her feet knew which way to go. She turned left. The path changed. The trees grew farther apart. The ground became rougher, rooted and ridged. She followed the curve of the land, until the orchard gave way to something new. A stone wall,
low,
lichen covered. It stretched in both directions, parting the orchard from whatever lay beyond. There was no gate, but something had pushed through once, long ago, a gap wide enough to squeeze through sideways. She stepped beyond the wall and found herself in a grove. Circular.
perfect.
In the center stood a table made of white stone. No chairs, no shadows. On the table, a mirror,
Round,
silver-rimmed, face up to the sky. She approached it slowly. The mirror reflected only clouds. No branches, no leaves, and not her own face. She leaned closer. Still, no reflection. Only clouds, churning slowly. Then a shape, a second face. Not hers, but familiar. A girl with hollowed cheeks, wide eyes, and lips that trembled, like she wanted to speak, but never could. Eva touched the mirror's surface. It was warm. The girl in the reflection blinked, spoke silently. No sound, just lips moving. And then Eva heard her, not aloud, but inside. They keep what they name. Don't give it. Don't give yours. The mirror darkened. Clouds swallowed it whole. When Eva looked up, the trees had shifted again. Let us drift further, gently, into the deep, whispering stillness, where nothing ever truly vanishes, only waits to be seen. Soft as smoke, slow as breath, woven with quiet dread. For the dreaming mind, the grove had changed. The trees now stood like sentinels, taller than before, bark pale as bone, leaves fluttering though no wind stirred. Eva backed away from the mirror. Its surface remained black, heavy with something unsaid. She turned slowly, carefully, and found that the orchard path had disappeared. In its place, a narrow trail of flat, smooth stones, each one carved faintly, symbols that shifted when she looked too long. A sun, a gate, a teacup,
a key.
The last one had a name etched into it. Her name. Eva knelt, touched the stone. It was warm, and it pulsed faintly under her hand, as if it remembered her. She rose and walked onward, following the stones. The mist curled low at her ankles, cool and slow. A hush fell across the trees, like breath held in a chapel. Then, a clearing, and in the middle,
A door.
not attached to any wall, not part of any structure, just a tall, wooden door, standing upright in the earth, surrounded by nothing. It had a brass knob, a small, keyless lock, and on its frame, a set of tiny etchings, not words, marks, 7 vertical lines, and one struck through them all, a tally. She reached out, fingers grazing the grain of the wood. It was damp with dew, smelled faintly of rosemary. Behind her, the mist thickened, closed the path she had come from. She was meant to go forward. Eva turned the knob. It opened with a sigh. Beyond it, not a room, but a corridor of stone walls, lit by candlelight that flickered gently in tall sconces. The air smelled of parchment, and dried apples, and smoke. She stepped through. The door closed silently behind her. The corridor bent left, then right, like a spiral, each wall lined with frames, but no pictures, only empty ovals, as if the images had been removed, or never painted at all. Her footsteps were soft on the stone floor. Her shadow followed her precisely, never lagging, never moving ahead. She passed a niche where a statue once stood. Only the pedestal remained, with a faint circle of dust, where the base had been. And then, at the end of the hallway, a bell,
Small, silver.
mounted beside a closed curtain, of heavy green velvet. No window, no knob, no lock, just the bell. She looked around. No sound followed her. The corridor had gone quiet again. So she raised her hand and rang it.
Once.
A clear, soft chime. The curtain twitched, just slightly, then drew back.
Slowly.
Behind it, a single chair, bathed in candlelight, and behind that chair, A wall covered entirely in mirrors.
Dozens of them.
All oval, all framed in tarnished silver. But none showed her reflection. Not one. Each mirror held a different scene. A different girl. One plucking apples from a tree. One standing beside a locked gate. One pouring tea into a cup. And, watching it swirl, she stepped closer. The mirrors didn't flicker. Didn't change. Except for one. In the corner. The smallest. It showed a girl sitting in a room. Dark hair. Barefoot. She was writing. But the page was blank. Eva leaned in. The girl paused. Looked up. Looked at her. And smiled.
The hush grows deeper now. What once felt strange becomes familiar. What once felt safe no longer does. Told in soft, hypnotic rhythms. To lull the body even as the mind drifts. Closer to the truth. Eva stepped back from the mirror. The girl's smile lingered. Not warm, not cruel, but knowing. As if she'd already lived this moment before. Eva turned. The chair in the center of the room was no longer empty. Finch sat in it now. Or someone who looked like Finch. Same posture. Same calm hands folded in his lap. But the face was slightly wrong. The features too smooth. The eyes a shade too flat. The skin too still. "Hello, Eva," he said, without blinking. "You're not him," she whispered. The man tilted his head, as if surprised. As if the truth mattered at all. "I've been called many things," he said. "But yes, Finch was one." He stood. The mirrors behind him did not reflect his movement. They held only the girls. Dozens of them. Standing still now. Watching. "Where are they?" Eva asked. Her voice was steady. Softer than her heartbeat. "They're safe," he replied. "Some are dreaming. Some are remembering. Some are gone," she said. The not Finch figure smiled faintly. "Gone is such a final word. Let's say rearranged." He reached out a hand. Not toward her, but toward a small wooden cabinet near the wall. It opened on its own. Inside, a drawer filled with tags. Each one had a name written in looping ink, tied with red string. Some names had been crossed out. Others were doubled. The same name twice. He drew one out and turned it toward her. It read, "Eva Finch." "You don't get to choose that," she said. "But someone must," he replied gently. "And so few ever ask." He stepped closer. The mirrors behind him flickered. A few of the girls began to move again. Pouring tea, climbing ladders, writing with quills that left no ink behind. "Where is Martin?" she asked. "Martin was borrowed," he said simply. "Like all the rest. He served his purpose." "And when you're finished borrowing someone?" she asked. He didn't answer, just stepped aside, gesturing toward a narrow door Eva hadn't seen before. No handle, no frame, only a carved line down the middle, barely visible, like a scar in the stone. "Would you like to see where names are kept?" he asked. She didn't move. "I'd like to leave," she said instead. "You are leaving," he said, piece by piece. The mirrors behind her pulsed faintly. One showed her walking through the orchard. Another, her sleeping in the chair. Another, her writing at a desk with a quill she did not own. Too many versions. Too many selves. The name tag still hovered between them. Eva Finch. She stepped forward. The mirrors went quiet again. The not Finch man held the tag out like an offering. "I don't want it," she said. "Then give it back." "To whom?" "To the orchard," he whispered. And with that, he stepped back into the wall of mirrors, and was gone. Only the chair remained, and the tag. He picked it up, felt the ink pulse faintly through the parchment. It was warm, still drying. She turned it over, blank on the back. No way out, only forward. She stepped toward the narrow door, reached for the line carved down the middle. It opened beneath her hand, not outward, not inward, simply parted. And the air that poured from the other side smelled of loam, and candle wax, and pages that had never been read. The path continues, winding slow and strange, like a dream that won't let go. Let your breath soften now, as we descend a little deeper, told in calm, measured rhythm, each word chosen to lull, each image wrapped in sleep. The door parted around her, soft as silk, silent as fog, and beyond it, a circular chamber, stone walls, no corners, no ceiling she could see, just shadow above, and hundreds of shelves, carved directly into the walls, spiraling upward like a library that had grown from the earth itself. Each shelf held a single book, identical in size, in thickness, in quiet, but none had titles. Eva stepped inside. The stone beneath her was warmer than she expected, like the floor had been waiting for her footsteps. She reached for a book at shoulder height. Its cover was soft, not leather, not cloth, something in between. She opened it slowly. No pages, only a hollow. Inside, a lock of hair, curled like a ribbon, tied with red string. She closed the book and placed it back on the shelf, reached for another. This one held a tooth. Perfect, pearly white against black velvet. He shivered. Book by book, they held fragments, a ring, button, a single glove. Some smelled faintly of rosemary, others like smoke, and one like the orchard's apples in early fall. Object, a memory, but not hers. She turned to leave, but the doorway was gone. No exit, no handle, just the quiet spiral of shelves, rising and rising into the dark above her. And then, the step, coming from the wall. Panel shifted. A figure stepped through. Martin, or someone wearing his face. But his eyes looked unfamiliar now. Too wide, too pale. I thought I'd find you here, he said. Voice low, calm, measured like Finch's. Eva didn't answer. He looked around at the books. They like to keep pieces, so they don't forget. Forget what? She asked. Who they borrowed from. He stepped to a lower shelf, pulled out a book bound in navy blue, opened it. Inside, a tiny porcelain teacup, cracked, and beneath it, a folded piece of paper. Martin handed it to her. She opened it slowly. Only one sentence written there. The house does not end. Only the guest list changes. Eva folded it again. Her hands trembled slightly, but the message sat quiet in her chest. Are you real? She asked him. Martin tilted his head. Real enough, he said. And then his smile slipped, just for a breath. The shape of his mouth forgot how to be human. Eva stepped back. Don't go up, he warned her. And then he vanished. Not behind a door, not through a wall, just gone. Like breath, like mist, like memory. Alone again. Eva walked to the center of the room. There on the floor, etched in faint lines, spiral, at its center, a mark she hadn't seen before. Feather, drawn with sharp edges and no ink. She knelt beside it, and the moment her hand brushed the stone, the room shifted. Not turned, not fell, shifted, like the whole chamber had inhaled once, and turned inside itself. When she opened her eyes, the shelves were gone. She stood in a round room, except for a single pedestal. On it, book, pen, waiting. She stepped forward. Its pages were filled now, writing soft and pale, like it had been written in fog. She read the first line aloud, and though her voice barely rose above a whisper, the room echoed the words. I woke in a house that did not belong to time. Her own handwriting. She turned the page. The story continued. Her thoughts, her actions, chapters she'd lived, written before she lived them. At the bottom of the page, blank line, and a quill, no ink pot, no guidance, just space to write. She hesitated, then slowly, carefully, Eva picked up the quill and began to write her name.
The lines are being written now, by her hand and not her will. And yet she writes because the house remembers, and because names are the only thing it cannot change. Told in gentle hush. for the quiet listener tucked beneath blankets, drifting where dreams blur with truth. The quill felt too light, too delicate. It moved like it had memory, as though it had written her name 100 times before. Eva stopped at the final letter. The ink shimmered faintly, though no ink had been visible. She watched her name fade, until it was just the ghost of a mark. The page turned itself. The next one was blank, except for a single question written at the top. "Who else will you remember?" She dropped the quill. The room didn't respond. The pedestal remained still. But something behind her shifted. A sound soft, like paper fluttering, like breath caught in a jar. She turned. The spiral was gone. In its place, a staircase, carved from stone, spiraling upward without rails, disappearing into a warm, golden haze. One step, then another. The stone was smoother than before. It held warmth, like hands that had waited too long. With every step she climbed, she passed niches carved into the wall, and in each a mask. Dozens, hundreds, each one still, each one different. Old, weathered wood, delicate painted clay, some smiling, some frowning, some blank. And beneath each mask, a tiny plaque etched with a name. But some names were missing letters, some reversed, some scratched out entirely. She paused at one mask, small, pale, with closed eyes. The plaque read, V_. The rest had been scrubbed away. She touched it gently. The wood was cold. The mask exhaled. Just once, like it remembered something. She pulled her hand back, then kept climbing. At the top of the staircase, she found herself in a round hallway. The air smelled like candle smoke and pressed linen. 6 doors stood in a circle, all closed, all identical, except one had a ribbon tied to the knob, red silk, like the one she'd seen in the orchard. The door opened on its own. As she approached,
Inside.
a small bedroom, familiar, too familiar. The wallpaper, gold vines. The bed, neatly made. The teacup sitting on the table, and in the chair by the hearth, herself, eyes closed, breathing slow, asleep. She stepped closer, watched the slow rise and fall of the chest, the twitch of fingers in dreaming. On the nightstand, a second cup, this one half full, still warm. A tag hung from its rim. Her name again. Eva touched the cup. The sleeping version of her shifted in the chair, brows furrowed, fingers curled, then opened her eyes. Not startled, not afraid. She smiled, a soft, sad smile, and whispered, "You're almost done." The room dimmed. The lantern beside the bed flickered, then grew brighter. The sleeping Eva, the other Eva, stood slowly and reached for her hand. They touched, and for a moment, both of them breathed together. Same breath, same rhythm, same thought. But then the light bent strangely, and only one remained. Eva stood alone. The cup on the table was gone. The hearth was cold, and a new door stood open in the corner of the room. And now the quiet turns inward, like the last few pages of a book you never meant to finish, soft and slow, like fading candlelight, guiding the listener gently through the gathering mist. Eva stepped through the final door, not hurried, not afraid, just ready. The hallway beyond was long and narrow, paneled in dark wood. The scent of cedar clung to the air, and with every step she took, a faint ticking grew louder. Not one clock, not 2, but dozens. She turned the corner and found the clock room. Every wall was covered, floor to ceiling, in clocks of all kinds. Mantle clocks, pocket watches, grandfather clocks. Some ticked in rhythm, some were out of sync, some didn't move at all, but none of them showed the same time. She stood in the center, watching the pendulum sway like breath. The air felt heavier here, like the room remembered too many yesterdays, and hadn't yet chosen which one to keep. Then she noticed, on a small writing desk by the far wall, a folder,
Plain.
unlabeled. She crossed the room carefully, mindful not to bump the chains or weights. She opened the folder. Inside were pages torn from old guest books, each line a name. Some were faded, some blotted out, some freshly written. She flipped through them until she found her own. Eva, arrived, not yet recorded. Below that, a faint pencil mark had been added. Integration expected before bell. She frowned, looked around. One clock, a tall grandfather with ivy carved into its sides, began to chime. But the sound was not a bell. It was a low, humming note, like something sung from a great distance. The light in the room dimmed. Not dark, just soft, like twilight in a chapel. She turned slowly in place. Each clock's face had changed. Now they all showed the same time, midnight, but the hands didn't move. They simply pointed upward, perfectly aligned, like arrows at rest. Then, across the room, a second folder appeared on the desk. It hadn't been there before. It was deep red, velvety to the touch, tied shut with black thread. She undid the knot carefully. Inside, a list. But this one didn't show names. Only roles. The watcher, the steward, the guest, the mirror, the door, the key, and below all that, a new one written by hand. The one who remembers. The line beside it was blank, waiting. She placed a fingertip to the page. Ink appeared beneath it, curling into her name, Eva. The clocks began to tick again, all at once, in rhythm. Their sound no longer chaotic,
but calm.
a kind of heartbeat. And with it, the room changed. No walls, no clocks, only mist. And in the mist, a tree, twisted, lovely, ancient, its roots curling into the earth like script, and hanging from its branches, small glass charms. Each one cradled a flicker of light. She walked toward it, felt no fear, only the sensation of remembering something. She'd never known she'd forgotten. At the base of the tree,
A stone bench.
she sat. Above her, the charms tinkled softly, like wind chimes in slow motion. She rested her head back against the bark. It was warm, and for the first time in many chapters, she closed her eyes.
The hush deepens, and memory drips like honey through the cracks. What is dream? And what is the house? And what is Eva now? Told in slow, gliding rhythm, to rock the listener gently. Between wonder and rest, the tree hummed, a deep, slow vibration, almost like breath, or like a song too old to remember the words. Eva kept her eyes closed. The bench beneath her held firm. The bark at her back felt like velvet. The charms above her swayed with no wind. She could feel the house shifting around her, not in motion, but in mood. The house had many moods, some curious, some hungry. This one felt tired, as if the house too needed to sleep. Something touched her shoulder. She opened her eyes. A woman stood beside her, older, wrapped in a green shawl stitched with stars. Her hands looked like folded maps, lines and marks of many years. She didn't speak at first. She simply sat beside Eva. They listened to the trees hum together. Then the woman turned and asked, soft as dusk, "Do you know where you are now?" Eva nodded faintly. "Somewhere between remembering and being forgotten," she said. The woman smiled. "Very close." She reached into her shawl and pulled out a small object. Bell. But not the kind you ring. This one was tiny. No clapper, no sound. It shimmered slightly in her palm, like it had a heartbeat of its own. She held it out to Eva. "Take it," she said. "What is it?" "A silence no one else can hear," the woman whispered. "It will keep you when the noise comes." Eva took the bell, felt cool, then warm, then neither. It settled into her hand like it had always been hers. The woman rose, dusted the folds of her shawl. "The house is changing again," she said. "How do you know?" The woman looked up at the charms swaying in the branches. "They always move before the roots do," she replied. Eva stood too. The tree no longer looked like bark and leaf, but like memory shaped into wood. Every knot on the trunk, every groove in the root, seemed to echo things she'd never spoken aloud. She stepped closer to the base. There, beneath the roots, a small hollow opened like a sigh, just wide enough to crawl into. She looked back at the woman. "You won't come. I've already been there," the woman said. She reached into her shawl again and drew out a small mirror, cracked at one edge, frame made of bone. "You'll need to see," she said, pressing it gently into Eva's palm. Eva looked down at her reflection, but it wasn't her. It was a child, waited, standing beside a man with a carved walking stick. They were beneath this same tree, many seasons ago. Then the image faded. Only her own face remained. Still here. She turned toward the hollow and knelt. The roots parted for her, not like doors, not like stone, but like something alive, allowing her through. The earth was warm. The air smelled of moss and old letters. She crawled gently, hands brushing against the roots, the soil soft beneath her palms. The deeper she went, the quieter it became, until she could hear only her breath and the faint echo of the bell in her pocket. Glow. She emerged into a chamber beneath the tree, perfectly round, and at its center, pool. Dark, but not water. Smooth as glass. Above it hung an inkless quill, suspended in air, waiting. The walls around her pulsed faintly. Not stone, not wood, something older, etched all around the chamber, were names, thousands of them. Some she recognized, some she didn't. One was her own, Eva, lit faintly, still forming. She stepped to the edge of the pool. The surface rippled. Images shimmered there. Not her past, but her possibilities. Who she might have been. What she could still become. Hand. Voice. She leaned closer. The ink whispered her name back. And waited. We have arrived at the final door. The hush is full now. Of breath, of memory. Of all the names once whispered into darkness. The last dream in this quiet journey. Let it unfold slowly, like fog lifting from the orchard at dawn. Eva stood at the edge of the ink pool, the silent quill still floating above it. The chamber hummed, but not with sound, with presence, with all the voices of all the guests who had ever passed through the house. They weren't speaking words, only waiting. She reached out to the quill. It drifted down into her hand, light as breath, cool as rain. The pool stirred. She did not dip the quill into it. She didn't need to. The moment her hand stilled, the ink began to rise, slowly, softly, and wrote in the air itself. Just one word, Eva, and then another, remember. She lowered the quill. The air held her name, glowing faintly. Behind her, the roots began to part again. A turn. The hollow was no longer narrow and dark. It had widened. Sunlight poured in. Birdsong drifted faintly through. And somewhere in the distance, the soft creak of orchard branches. In the morning breeze, she stepped forward. Her hands touched soil and moss and root. And then, she was outside. The orchard glowed. It was still early morning. Light dusted the apples like gold. A kettle whistled gently from the nearby house. The door was ajar. She looked down at her hands. Clean. No ink. No scratches. Only the faintest shimmer of something that might have been. Memory. She stepped into the house. Everything was quiet. Finch sat in the corner chair, reading. He looked up, smiled softly. "No more mirrors today," he said. "No more names?" she asked. Finch shook his head. "Only yours." She walked past him, to the little round table by the hearth. Teacup waited there, still warm. Her name was written on the tag, but this time, it was in her own handwriting. She sat, took a sip, let the warmth fill her. Outside, the leaves rustled. In the distance, bells chimed faintly. Not clocks, not warnings, a sound. The house no longer shifted, rested, and she rested with it. In this small moment, under the hush of trees, with tea in hand and sunlight spilling like quiet gold, across the floor, Eva closed her eyes and remembered only what she chose.
We drift onward, though the house seems still. But silence, as you've come to know, is only another kind of voice, told in hushed tones, each word wrapped in candlelight. For those who listen with closed eyes and open dreams, the teacup in Eva's hands had gone cold. But she didn't notice. The warmth wasn't in the cup now. It was in her limbs, in her chest, in the quiet curve of her breath. Outside the window, the orchard swayed, and above it, a pale sky turned slowly, cloudless and strange. She stood. The chair made no sound. The floorboards held her gently, as if they had missed her weight. She crossed the room. The door was still open, just as she'd found it. But the world beyond no longer looked like morning. There was no path now, just mist and outlines. The orchard blurred. The fences wavered. She stepped through anyway. The grass beneath her feet had a soft crunch, like memory being stepped on. Somewhere to her right, a quiet voice. Familiar. She turned. Two figures stood by the old shed. One leaned against the doorframe. The other sat on an overturned crate, hands busy with something unseen. They weren't speaking aloud, just exchanging glances, movements, long silences. Eva stepped closer. The air shimmered faintly. The closer she drew, the more the scene seemed stuck, like a looped memory, like actors waiting for the next line. Then, finally, the one sitting down looked up at her, eyes pale, hands stained faintly red, and for a breath, Eva remembered. The orchard wasn't always a garden. Once, there had been a table in this shed, a long one, with linen and rope and things that weren't for dinner. She blinked. The vision vanished. Now the shed was empty. A rake, a coil of twine, a row of boots with no names beneath them. But her pulse still trembled. She stepped inside. The air smelled like dust and rosemary, and beneath the scent, something sweet, something metallic. She didn't look for the source. She followed the light instead. In the far corner, a trapdoor, barely visible beneath a faded rug. She lifted it. A wooden ladder descended into earth.
And below, faint candlelight,
Soft and flickering, as if it might go out at any moment. She climbed down,
slowly, carefully.
Each rung hummed softly beneath her hand, like it knew her touch. At the bottom, a corridor, stone,
Damp,
lined with doors. Each door had a mark carved above it. Some were letters, some were shapes, some were nothing more than scratches. She passed the first, and the second. At the third, she paused. No handle, only a small window,
just big enough to peek through.
She looked.
Inside, a chair.
And in it, a figure, still, slumped, wrapped in a heavy coat that looked far too warm for this place. The face was turned away, the hair too familiar. She reached up,
Tapped the glass.
the figure turned slowly, and Eva stared back at herself, but not quite. The expression was colder, the eyes bruised with sleep or something deeper, and the mouth moved, forming a word, over and over. Stay. Eva stepped back. The figure inside stilled, as if it had never moved at all.
She moved on.
At the corridor's end, a door made of glass, frosted, but not locked. She pushed it open, and entered a long, echoing hall. Dozens of chairs, each filled with someone sleeping, heads bowed, hands folded, breath shallow and steady. Some she recognized, from mirrors, from dreams, from the orchard. Others were strangers, and all of them wore tags, pinned gently to their collars. Each one read the same.
Guest.
Not yet returned. Eva walked the row in silence. Somewhere near the back, a table. On it, a small guest book. The pen beside it had no ink. She picked it up. opened the book. The page was blank, except for a line at the top. What did you take with you? She didn't write anything. Instead, she turned the page. Blank again, and again, and again, until, what will you leave behind? She picked up the pen, hesitated, and then wrote, in soft, curved script, only the name that remembers me. Behind her, one of the sleepers stirred. A chair creaked. A breath caught in the dark. And the hall, for a moment, seemed to lean toward her, watching, waiting. But Eva only closed the book and turned once more toward the mist. We drift onward now, into rooms even the house has forgotten. The names are fading, the memories curling like smoke, woven with soft echoes and sleep-drenched steps. Let the hush deepen with every word. Eva did not return the way she came. The mist folded around her. The hallway, the sleepers, the guest book, all disappeared behind her like breath on glass. There was no ladder, no path, no orchard, only the sense of movement, not walking, but being guided, not air, not earth, just space. She blinked, and when her eyes opened, she was standing in a room,
Round.
unfurnished, no ceiling, no floor, and yet she stood. The space pulsed gently, as if breathing with her. Soft light trickled down, but no source revealed itself. Walls drifted at the edges of vision, shifting like silken water. In the center of the room, a single object, a mirror, large, oval, its frame made of interwoven branches, each carved with tiny symbols. She stepped toward it. Her reflection did not greet her. Instead, the mirror showed a field, a wide, empty place, a figure standing far away, back turned. She leaned closer. The figure turned slowly. It was Finch, but not. The same gray coat, the same bent posture, but the face held no features, just smooth skin where eyes and mouth should have been. He raised his hand, pointed to the edge of the mirror. A ripple passed across the surface. Then he disappeared. She touched the glass.
Cool.
It yielded under her fingertips, like the surface of water. She pressed forward and passed through. The field was silent. Sky, a deep, honeyed gray. Wind, none. Grass, still and pale. Eva stood alone. The mirror behind her dissolved into mist. Ahead, a figure.
Different this time.
A woman in red, hair pulled tight beneath a lace cap. She sat at a low table, set for tea. But there were no teacups, no steam, only paper. Stacks and stacks of folded pages, each one tied with string. The woman looked up. Finally, she whispered. Her voice was not old, nor young. It felt like it had spoken through centuries. Eva stepped forward. What is this place? The woman didn't answer. She slid a page across the table. Eva unfolded it. Words flowed across the paper. Sentences written in her own voice. Things she had not yet done. Thoughts she hadn't yet thought. And at the bottom, choose the line you will forget. Eva looked up. I don't understand. You can't carry everything, said the woman gently. Something must be left behind. Eva read the lines again. One spoke of a door she had never opened. Another, a name she had not yet learned. One line read, he never really followed you, only watched. And another, the orchard was never real. She touched that one. It warmed beneath her fingertip, then faded.
Gone.
The woman nodded. That will make the leaving easier. Eva looked down at the rest of the pages. Blank now. All of them. The woman gathered them in silence. Burned them in a small dish. No smoke. Just a pale shimmer. Ash that drifted upward. And vanished into nothing. The woman stood. This is where the hallway ends. She turned and pointed to a thin line in the distance. Not a door. Not a gate. Just a shimmer. Eva walked toward it. Each step slower.
Softer.
As if the grass was remembering her. She reached the shimmer. It opened like breath. And on the other side, a room.
Now we move into the final quiet spiral, where names begin to forget themselves, and memory curls like paper at the edge of fire. The second to last hush, before everything becomes still. Let it drift softly, like an old lullaby sung by the walls. The room beyond the shimmer was not a room, was a library, but not the kind she remembered from childhood. Not shelves, not ladders, not rows of stories waiting to be opened. No, this library was round, like the rings inside an ancient tree. Each wall was layered with shallow drawers, hundreds, thousands, and in the center, a desk. At the desk sat a woman, ink-stained fingers, spectacles perched too low, hair twisted into a knot that had forgotten its shape. She didn't look up, just turned the page in front of her. Gritch, scratch, quill on parchment, ink on memory. Eva stepped forward. The room welcomed her without sound, just a subtle warmth, like a fireplace had once been lit here, and the stones still remembered. The woman finally looked up, not startled, not surprised. "Eva," she said calmly. "Name recorded. Arrival noted." Eva blinked. "I've already been recorded." "Of course," the woman replied. "You arrived long before you entered." She gestured to a drawer. "Top row, 8th from the right." Eva walked over, opened it. Inside, scroll. She unrolled it carefully. It was a list. Dreams, moments. Asked a question she didn't voice. Paused before leaving the orchard. Forgot the color of the tea. At the bottom, a new line appeared as she watched. Opened the drawer. She looked up. The archivist was writing again. "Am I just being written?" Eva asked. "No," the woman replied. "You're doing the writing. I'm only keeping it safe." Another drawer opened by itself. Inside, tiny brass key. No label. No explanation. Eva took it. The metal pulsed faintly. Steady heartbeat. The archivist nodded toward the far wall. "Your final record is waiting," she said. "What do I do with this key?" "Unlock what's already yours." Eva walked to the wall. A small wooden box had appeared on a pedestal. Simple, smooth, familiar. She inserted the key. The lock clicked. Inside the box, a folded piece of linen. She lifted it. It was a handkerchief, embroidered in soft thread. "Return if able." She turned it over. The name stitched there wasn't hers. It was Thomas. The name hit her gently, like a dream she'd nearly forgotten, like a bell tolling far across a quiet hill. Thomas. There had been someone. Not here. Not in the house. But before. Boy with muddy boots. Laugh like wind. The orchard wasn't hers alone. She turned to the archivist. "Where is he?" The woman didn't answer directly. Instead, she opened another drawer. Inside, a mirror the size of a coin. Eva took it, held it up. The surface shimmered, not with reflection, but with voice. "He never left. He's only waiting to be found." The library darkened slightly. A bell began to toll in the distance. 12 slow chimes. Not warning, not alarm, just calling. The archivist closed her book, folded her hands. "This is your last chapter," she said softly. "One more room." Eva turned toward the far wall. A door had appeared, shimmering, waiting. She pressed the handkerchief to her chest, tucked the mirror into her pocket, and walked forward. The door opened before she touched it, and the orchard, quiet and dark, waited once more beyond it. We have arrived at the final door. The hush is full now, of breath, of memory, of all the names once whispered into darkness. The last dream in this quiet journey. Let it unfold slowly, like fog lifting from the orchard at dawn. Eva stood at the edge of the ink pool, the silent quill still floating above it. The chamber hummed, but not with sound, with presence, with all the voices of all the guests who had ever passed through the house. They weren't speaking words, only waiting. She reached out to the quill. It drifted down into her hand, light as breath, cool as rain. The pool stirred. She did not dip the quill into it. She didn't need to. The moment her hand stilled, the ink began to rise, slowly, softly, and wrote in the air itself. Just one word, Eva. And then, another, remember. She lowered the quill. The air held her name, glowing faintly. Behind her, the roots began to part again. He turned. The hollow was no longer narrow and dark. It had widened. Sunlight poured in. Birdsong drifted faintly through. And somewhere in the distance, the soft creak of orchard branches. In the morning breeze, she stepped forward. Her hands touched soil and moss and root. And then, she was outside. The orchard glowed. It was still early morning. Light dusted the apples like gold. A kettle whistled gently from the nearby house. The door was ajar. She looked down at her hands. Clean. No ink. No scratches. Only the faintest shimmer of something that might have been memory. She stepped into the house. Everything was quiet. Finch sat in the corner chair, reading. He looked up, smiled softly. No more mirrors today, he said. No more names, she asked. Finch shook his head. Only yours. She walked past him, to the little round table by the hearth. Teacup waited there, still warm. Her name was written on the tag, but this time, it was in her own handwriting. She sat, took a sip, let the warmth fill her. Outside, the leaves rustled. In the distance, bells chimed faintly. Not clocks, not warnings, a sound. The house no longer shifted, rested, and she rested with it. In this small moment, under the hush of trees, with tea in hand and sunlight spilling like quiet gold across the floor, Eva closed her eyes and remembered only what she chose.